I was dragged across the stars and forced to stand before an alien queen whose mere glance could erase lives. I expected judgment. I expected fear. I expected to kneel. But when her crown fell at my feet, I did the one thing no one in her empire had done for centuries. I picked it up and gave it back. That was the moment everything changed, and I had no idea I had just passed a test that would bind my fate to hers forever. The first thing he noticed was that the floor was breathing, not metaphorically, not poetically, actually breathing. It expanded beneath his boots with a slow, patient rhythm, rising barely a few millimeters before settling again. If he stood still long enough, he could feel the motion through the thin soles of his shoes, like standing on the chest of some enormous sleeping creature. He wasn't sure if that made him a guest or a parasite. He decided not to ask. The guards beside him didn't seem concerned. They stood perfectly upright, tall and silent, their long ears angled slightly backward like sails catching invisible wind. Their purple skin reflected the ambient light of the corridor, which itself had no visible source. The walls glowed softly, veins of pale gold and violet flowing through them in slow currents. He had the uncomfortable realization that the walls might also be breathing. He swallowed. "Okay," he muttered under his breath. "Totally normal. Completely fine, kidnapped by a sentient lung." Neither guard reacted. He wasn't sure if they couldn't hear him or were simply professionally committed to ignoring human existential commentary. They had taken everything from him except his clothes and the small translator attached to his collar. The device was smooth and oval, pulsing faintly with blue light, like it was alive and judging him silently. Which, frankly, was fair. 3 days ago, he'd been repairing a communications relay on the outer edge of a mining colony. A boring job. The kind of boring job that paid just enough to keep him from starving and just little enough to ensure he'd never escape it. Then the sky had opened. Not dramatically. No explosions. No heroic music. Just a silent fracture in reality, a vertical line of white light that appeared above the colony like someone had sliced the universe open with a knife. Everyone froze. Everyone except him. Because he'd been holding a wrench, and when you're holding a wrench, your brain insists you finish whatever stupid task you started before acknowledging cosmic horror. By the time he looked up properly, it was already too late. The light expanded, the air distorted, and figures stepped through. Tall, calm, certain, purple skin, long ears, golden eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. Someone had screamed. It might have been him. He wasn't proud enough to rule that out. There had been no weapons, no threats, just presence. And then one of them had looked directly at him, not past him, not through him, at him. He remembered that part clearly because it made his stomach drop in a way gravity had never managed before. They approached. He had considered running. He didn't. Running felt rude, also pointless. One of them had raised a hand, and the air around him folded inward like soft fabric. He hadn't lost consciousness. He hadn't felt pain. He had simply stopped being on the mining colony and started being somewhere else. Here, where the floors breathed, where the walls watched, where he was currently being escorted down a corridor that curved too smoothly to have been built by anything that used tools. He cleared his throat. "So," he said, mostly to reassure himself that he still existed. "Not to complain, but this is officially the weirdest customer service experience I've ever had." One of the guards glanced at him, just briefly. Her eyes were gold. Not golden-colored, gold, like polished metal warmed by sunlight. She said nothing. He wasn't sure if that was good. They continued walking. The corridor widened ahead, opening into a vast chamber. The ceiling rose so high it faded into translucent haze, currents of soft light flowing through it like slow rivers. And there were others, dozens of them, aliens, all of them like the guards, tall, elegant, impossibly composed. Their garments flowed around them as if gravity were more of a suggestion than a law. They stood in quiet formation, their attention unified and focused forward, toward the center. His stomach tightened. He didn't know why, but he knew he was supposed to go there. One of the guards gently gestured forward. He pointed at himself. Me. She did not nod, she did not need to, he sighed softly. Of course me. He stepped forward alone, his footsteps unnaturally loud against the living floor. Every eye followed him. He resisted the overwhelming urge to wave awkwardly and say hello. Barely. The chamber seemed to stretch around him, the air thick with something he couldn't name. Not hostility, not quite, expectation. He reached the center, and then he saw her. She stood elevated on a circular platform that appeared grown rather than constructed, its surface smooth and pale beneath her bare feet. She looked human. That was the first lie his brain told him. The proportions were familiar. The posture. The shape of her face. But the details betrayed the truth. Her skin was a soft, luminous purple, flawless and unbroken. Her blonde hair fell past her shoulders in gentle waves, each strand catching the ambient light like threads of gold. And her ears, long, elegant, unmistakably alien, extended gracefully from the sides of her head. She wore no excessive ornamentation, no armor, no visible weapon. She didn't need them. Above her head floated a crown. It hovered effortlessly, a delicate structure of pale metal and faint light, rotating almost imperceptibly. He stared at it, then at her, then back at it. His brain, in its infinite wisdom, chose that moment to produce a single, coherent thought. Don't say anything stupid. He opened his mouth. Hi. He closed it immediately. Several of the surrounding aliens shifted subtly. He considered digging a hole and living in it permanently. The queen, because she had to be the queen, tilted her head slightly, studying him. Not judging, observing, like he was a puzzle she hadn't decided to solve yet. His heart pounded in his chest. He was painfully aware of every breath, every blink, every microscopic movement. He had no idea what he was supposed to do. Bow, kneel, apologize for existing. He settled for standing very still and trying to look like someone who understood what was happening. He failed, spectacularly. And then, without warning, the crown fell. It didn't wobble, it didn't slip. It simply descended, gently and deliberately, until it rested on the floor between them. The sound it made was soft, but in the silence of the chamber it might as well have been thunder. Everything stopped. No one moved. No one breathed. He stared at the crown, then at her. She did not react. She did not look surprised. She simply watched him, waiting. He had no context, no understanding of what this meant. His brain scrambled for guidance and found none. But instinct was faster than thought. He stepped forward. He bent down. He picked it up. It was warm, not warm like metal left in sunlight, warm like skin. He froze for half a second, suddenly unsure if he had just committed an unforgivable act or accidentally accepted alien kingship. Well, he whispered to himself, this is either very polite or very illegal. No one stopped him. No alarm sounded. So he did the only thing that made sense. He stepped closer and held it out to her. I think this belongs to you. His voice echoed slightly, small and fragile in the vast chamber. Her eyes met his. Gold, endless, ancient. She did not take the crown immediately. She looked at his hands, at the way he held it carefully, not possessively, not fearfully. Simply, respectfully. The silence stretched. His arm began to ache. He resisted the urge to say something like, please don't vaporize me. Finally, she moved. Her fingers closed around the crown, brushing his hand lightly. The contact sent a strange sensation through him, like static electricity mixed with something deeper. She lifted the crown, but she did not put it back on. Instead, she spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, and through the translator, perfectly understandable. You returned it. He blinked, yes. He hesitated. It seemed important. A faint ripple passed through the gathered aliens. He wasn't sure if it was approval or horror, possibly both. She continued to look at him, not as a ruler looked at a subject, not as a captor looked at a prisoner, as something else, something he didn't understand, and for reasons he couldn't explain, that was far more terrifying. She didn't take her eyes off him, not when she held the crown between her fingers, Not when the chamber remained frozen in a silence so complete it made his ears ring. Not even when his arm, still slightly extended from the act of returning it, began to regret every life decision that had led to this moment. He slowly lowered his hand, unsure whether he had just passed an exam or signed his execution order. "You returned it," she repeated. Her voice, filtered through the translator, carried something unusual. Not authority, not curiosity, certainty. He shifted his weight awkwardly. "Yes," he said again, because repeating himself felt safer than inventing new mistakes. A faint movement passed through the crowd behind him. He didn't turn, but he felt it, like grass bending before a distant storm. Her gaze flickered briefly to the crown in her hand, then back to him. "You did not hesitate." He considered lying. He did hesitate. Internally, he had panicked so hard he was fairly certain his ancestors had panicked retroactively. But externally, he had bent down and picked it up. "I mean," he said carefully, "I've dropped things before. It's usually nice when someone hands them back." Silence, absolute silence. He felt the sudden, overwhelming urge to apologize to the entire alien civilization. Instead, he smiled weakly. "That sounded smarter in my head." For the first time, something changed in her expression. It was subtle. So subtle he might have imagined it, but the corner of her mouth moved. Not much, just enough to confirm she was capable of it. Behind him, one of the aliens made a small, sharp sound. It might have been shock. It might have been indigestion. It was impossible to tell. She lifted the crown slightly, holding it between them. "You do not know what this is." It wasn't a question. He shook his head. "No." She tilted her head slightly, her long ear catching the ambient light. "You did not attempt to claim it." He frowned. "Claim it?" He glanced at the crown, then back at her. "I don't even know how it works." A pause. Then, before he could stop himself, he added, "Does it come with instructions?" Another ripple passed through the chamber. This one was different. He realized with growing alarm that some of them were suppressing reactions, suppressing amusement. Oh no. He had become entertainment. This was how it ended, not with heroism, with accidental comedy. She watched him closely. "You are not afraid." He laughed softly. "Oh, I'm extremely afraid." He gestured vaguely around the chamber. "I was taken from my planet by beings who can bend space like paper, brought into a living building, and handed what I assume is the most expensive hat in the universe." He met her eyes again. "I'm terrified." Another small silence. Then she asked, "Why did you return it?" The question lingered between them. He blinked. "Because it was yours." The answer felt obvious, but something in her gaze told him she needed to hear it. He shrugged slightly. "Because it didn't belong to me." The chamber reacted. He felt it like pressure in the air. Not anger, not approval, something heavier. She studied him with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Not exposed, understood. It was deeply uncomfortable. And strangely not unpleasant. She slowly raised the crown. For a moment he thought she would place it back above her head. Instead, she held it there, suspended between them. "You did not kneel," she said. He hesitated. "Should I have?" There it was again. That ripple, stronger this time. He resisted the urge to turn around and confirm whether he was offending royalty or performing stand-up comedy. She took one step closer. The distance between them shrank. He became painfully aware of how tall she was, how steady, how completely unafraid. "You saw me," she said. He frowned slightly. "I mean, yes." Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in focus. "You saw me, not the crown." He wasn't sure how to answer that. He had seen both, but the crown had just been an object. She had been something else. "I guess," he said slowly, "you seemed more important." He froze immediately after saying it. That sounded dangerous. Very dangerous. He opened his mouth to correct himself, but she spoke first. "Correct." The word carried quiet weight. She lifted the crown and released it. It did not fall. It hovered once more above her head, settling into its silent orbit as if it had never moved. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Progress. He was still alive. A promising development. She turned slightly, her gaze shifting toward the others in the chamber. None of them spoke. None of them moved. They simply watched, waiting. She returned her attention to him. "You will remain." He blinked. "Remain." He gestured vaguely. "Here." "Yes." He considered his options. Objecting seemed unwise. Running seemed impossible. Fainting seemed embarrassing. He settled for acceptance. "Okay." He paused, then added, "Do I get a room or should I just stand here forever?" Another pause. Then unmistakably she smiled. "Not fully, but enough. You will be given rest." Relief flooded through him. Rest sounded excellent. Rest sounded alive. Two guards stepped forward beside him, the same ones who had escorted him earlier. He glanced at the Queen one last time. She was still watching him, not like a ruler observing a subject, like a scientist observing a result she hadn't expected, or perhaps something even simpler, like a person meeting someone new. He gave her a small, awkward nod. She did not return it, but she did not look away. The guards gently gestured for him to follow. He obeyed, because obedience, he was learning, was an excellent survival strategy. As they walked, he leaned slightly toward the nearest guard. "Just out of curiosity," he whispered, "did I do something important?" She did not respond. He sighed. "Yeah, that tracks." They led him out of the chamber and into the breathing corridors once more. Behind him, the Queen remained where she stood, still, silent, watching the place where he had been. For the first time in centuries, something had occurred that she had not predicted, and she was not displeased. The room they gave him did not have corners. He discovered this immediately, and it bothered him more than being abducted across interstellar distances. Corners were important. Corners meant things ended. Corners meant the universe made sense. This room did not believe in endings. The walls curved into each other in seamless continuity, glowing faintly with slow-moving currents of pale violet. The floor breathed just like the corridors, though more gently here, as if it didn't want to disturb him. He stood in the center for a while, turning in a slow circle. "No corners," he said aloud. He waited. Nothing responded. He nodded. "Good, that would have been worse." A low platform extended itself from the wall behind him, unfolding like a patient mechanical flower. Its surface softened as it finished forming, subtly reshaping itself to match his height and posture. He stared at it. "I assume you're a bed," he said. It remained politely silent. He pointed at it. "If you eat me, I will be very disappointed." It did not eat him. Encouraged, he sat down. It adjusted immediately, conforming perfectly to his weight. Not too soft, not too firm, perfect. He hated it. "No one should have this much control over mattresses," he muttered. For the first time since his arrival, he was alone. No guards, no watching eyes, no golden gaze that saw through him, just him and the breathing room. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. He was not dead. He was not imprisoned. He was waiting. He wasn't sure which was worse. A section of the wall shifted, folding open silently. One of the guards entered, carrying a small translucent cube resting on her palm. It glowed faintly, its interior swirling with soft currents of light. She extended it toward him. He stared at it. "Please tell me that's not alive." The translator hesitated briefly before her voice emerged. "It is sustenance." He nodded slowly. That was not a reassuring answer. He took it carefully. It vibrated faintly in his hand. He raised an eyebrow. "It's nervous." She did not respond. He sighed and brought it closer to his face. It smelled faintly like citrus and something sharper, something electric. "Well," he said, "if this kills me, I want it on record that I died trying to be polite." He bit into it. The cube dissolved instantly, flooding his mouth with warmth and energy. It tasted like sunlight filtered through lightning. His muscles tensed involuntarily as a wave of strength spread through his body. He blinked. "Oh." He paused. "Oh, that's actually amazing." The guard watched him carefully. He pointed at the empty space where the cube had been. "I forgive you." She left without replying. He lay back on the bed, staring at the curved ceiling. He should have been panicking. Instead, he felt calm, not safe, but not afraid. Something had changed in him. He just didn't know what. The wall opened again later, but this time it wasn't a guard. It was her. She entered without announcement, without escort, without ceremony. The queen. Her blonde hair shimmered softly in the ambient light. Her purple skin seemed almost luminous against the living walls. The crown hovered above her head, rotating slowly, patiently. He sat up immediately. "Hi," he said. He paused. "Again." She approached him with measured steps, her golden eyes fixed on his. "You are recovering." It wasn't a question. "I think so," he said, "unless that cube was a delayed explosion." Her expression remained calm. It was nourishment. He nodded. 10 out of 10 would eat again. Silence lingered briefly. Then she asked, "Do you understand why you are here?" He considered lying again. He didn't know. She stopped a short distance from him. "The crown is not merely an object," she said. "It is a measure." He frowned. A measure of what? Her gaze did not waver. Character. He leaned back slightly. "I had a feeling it wasn't just a hat." She stepped closer. "For centuries, those who stood before me revealed themselves when it fell. They showed ambition, fear, greed, submission." She paused. "You showed none of these." He blinked. "I showed confusion." "Yes." She said it without hesitation. He laughed softly. "Good, I'm glad that translated." Her eyes softened just slightly. "You saw me as an individual, not as power." He shrugged. "You seemed like a person." The word hung in the air between them. Person, not ruler, not alien, person. She studied him in silence. Then slowly she reached up and removed the crown. It settled into her hands. For the first time since he had seen her, it was not above her. It was simply something she held. "I was not born to rule," she said. He frowned. "Then why do you?" "Because no one else would." She extended the crown slightly toward him. He froze. He said carefully, "I don't think that's a good idea." Her gaze remained steady. "I am not offering it to you." He exhaled. "Good, because I have no idea how to run an empire. I can barely run my own life." Something shifted in her expression. Amusement, small but real. "I am offering you a choice." He blinked. "A choice?" "You may return to your world," she said. "Not ruler and subject. Not queen and servant. Two individuals stepping forward into something neither of them fully controlled." Behind them, the room continued its slow, patient breathing. And for the first time since his arrival, he no longer felt like he was standing on something alive. He felt like he was becoming alive.